Welcome to episode 1251 of The Sleeper and the Bust. I am Justin Mason, joined as always by Jason Collette. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing well. We talked, I think it's always been like this weather thing. 2 weeks ago it was freezing, then it was yucky rain. Today's actually gorgeous, and it's an awesome day because we're in like day 5 of PitchCon. You and I were just watching the Ron Chandler presentation, and then you're on about 2 hours from now. I'm on at the last slot of the night with Sarah Langs and Meg Rowley. So I'm looking forward to that. And like a couple of things. One, before I forget, shout out to Mike from D Magazine, who listens to the podcast, also runs Jamie Newberg's book ordering. And they made sure I got the book. I ordered one of the Jamie's Texas Rangers World Series edition for my kid brother, who's a huge Rangers fan. And Mike made sure I got a copy. So thanks, Mike. And then secondly, happy Rotolab Day. If you're a Rotolab user like me and love it, it is live today. If you go to Baseball HQ or you go to rotolab.com, you can go find that. It is my personal, for all you old farts out there like me, it's my personal American Express card. I never leave home to draft without it. I love Rotolab. And I've used it forever. It is out today. Happy Rotolab Day. I know a lot of people have been waiting for it. I even heard from a friend of a friend yesterday who's in a draft and is like, I feel lost without Rotolab. And that's kind of how I've always sum it up, because it is my notepad for the next month. Everything I do is in there. That way, I've got the Waffle House Wharf League in a couple of weeks. Then it's Labor. Then it's I'm missing a league at one point. My Hardballers League. Then it's Tout. And then it's local leagues. I've got a lot of stuff coming up. So I am super happy Rotolab is finally out.
Yeah, I've used Rotolab in the past. I now use Tanner Bell's spreadsheet.
I use that too.
Available. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, if you go to smartfantasybaseball.com, Tanner Bell's put together some different pieces out there. They have the appendix to the process book. So if you've previously bought their process book, they wrote an appendix this year, and for $14.99 you get 100 pages of new information. I bought that the other night and was reading that on Friday night while I was watching first pitch panels. And then probably my favorite thing that Tanner's ever done is the projection aggregator. I mean, Justin, I know you're somebody who sits down and does their own projections. I've always said I do not, but I do love the projections aggregator because you can take up to 5 different sources. So you could pull the Fangraphs, you can pull RotoWire, you can pull Baseball HQ, whatever. You can pull 5 different things, and that tool will then aggregate those up, and then you can weigh those. So if you like one source more than the other, you can say, okay, I want to weigh this projection system, give it a 5, give this one a 1. So it gives you some flexibility. And the reason why I like it is because it's a study tool for me, because you can pull all those in and see where those things are. But then going back to Rotolab only allows you to import Baseball HQ projections. So if you can take that, then it's like, okay, you're sitting and transposing the projections from Tanner Bell's aggregator into Rotolab, and that allows you to take a deeper look at players. And so that's honestly how I spend a lot of my February getting ready for those March draft preps, especially in the deeper AL leagues that I play in, is that method. So happy to talk to anybody who wants. I've seen some people leaving comments here in the YouTube channel or in the Discord. Happy to engage anybody and talk about that process if you'd like.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you should go into every draft, whether it's in a draft or an auction, with some sort of software. Like, it's, unless you were playing in a league that does not allow you to bring that kind of stuff in, and there are leagues out there.
That's XFL.
Like that. Yep. You should definitely make sure that you have some sort of software with you to just give you proper valuations. So highly recommend both those products. We're going to talk again about a product that we have all played and talked about and endorsed. We talked about the NFBC, NFFC stuff on Friday with Paul. You wanted an opportunity to kind of chime in, and I have just a minor, like, I don't know if it's update or but just I want to talk a little bit more. So I'll give you the floor. What were your thoughts? What are your thoughts on everything that's happened over there at NFF?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are for the people. I mean, for those who don't know, Greg and Tom were colleagues of mine at one point. We were all together at Fanball. If we rewind way back when I was at Roto Junkie was purchased by Fanball, Ryan Houston and the group, and they purchased. So we all became one company. They bought the rights for that. And so from 2008 to 2010, when Liberty Media basically absorbed Fanball and busted it up, I was colleagues with Greg and Tom. And so like I've known these guys for that long, and I've helped run some of these drafts. And I just feel for them because I mean they have literally poured everything into all of this, and so yeah. And the other thing I would say, so I feel for the people there because those two are just awesome dudes. And I would say that the new person they brought in, I don't know if folks saw the news, but Jeff Stein is the new person they've added to staff. Jeff was also a colleague of mine back then. If you ever used Mock Draft Central back in the day, that Jeff was the brains, or really the guy that ran that whole operation. And so I'm excited to see how Jeff's going to help bridge everything. I basically withhold all the other judgments until everything else has come out. You never know how you're going to handle a situation like this, because this was like, you don't know how, as Greg and Tom, it's like, how do you never thought this was going to happen. And I don't, I get it with that, but I think, they've done the best job possible to do what they've done over the past week and what has easily been the most stressful time of their professional career. And I've seen some of the emotions in the NFBC Discord channel, or the NFC rather, Discord channel. It hasn't creeped its way over to Threads or Blue Sky, so I've only had screenshots of Twitter stuff sent to me. But I get it. I know some people are going to be emotional, but at the end of the day, it's back. Honestly, I'm not even trying to compare these two situations, but it's like one of the reasons why I haven't commented much on the whole Wander Franco situation. With the absence of details, I'm not going to go out there on this pedestal and start screaming about stuff. Give me the details. Let me make my own judgments. So, feel for the people. I'm still playing with everything, but again, I don't have giant bankroll in it. I mean, you have bankroll in it, so it's like your opinion weighs more than me. I just wanted a moment to speak. Don't forget the people side of this, because these two guys have put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over the years, and are two of the nicest dudes I've ever met in this industry. And I really feel for them that they have to go through this right now.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I mean, obviously if worse information comes out or something like that, we may change our opinion of everything going on there at this point. But it's been a pretty quiet couple days since, Paul and I last talked about it. So I think the hope is that maybe the worst of it is past. I spent the weekend talking to a number of people who I really trust their opinion of, including people in the legal profession and people who deal with this kind of specific law and stuff, right? After doing that, I feel better about playing there. And so, and what I said on Friday still stands. I totally understand if other people don't want to play there. I totally understand if people want to pull their money out. But after having the discussions I did with the people that I trust, I am making the decision to continue to play there. And I also said that I would be very transparent about whether or not I was going to continue to do that, because that was something that I was up in the air about. Now, if something else were to come out, maybe I might change that decision, but I wanted to, voice that, because on Friday I voiced that I was pretty scared about whether or not I should be playing there. So, I'm going to continue to play on NFBC, at least for the time being. TGFBI is for the time being is going to stay on NFBC. And I understand if some people have already voiced that they're going to drop out of TGFBI because of that. And I respect that decision. But I think in spite of everything that's gone on there or over there the last week, I still think it is one of the best platforms in fantasy baseball to play on. And because I've had the conversations I have, I feel a lot better about continuing to play over there.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for doing some of that legwork on the back. It's always nice to, seek outside, seek outside counsel, like somebody who's less attached to it emotionally. I mean, you've played for a few years. Obviously, you've won some money, you've lost some money, but we won't bring up your first main event team again.
Yeah, let's not do that. If this had happened after that first main event team, I might feel differently.
Yes, it was the system's fault that you drafted all those guys.
Exactly. So, but I mean, I think we all hope that the worst has already been discovered, and and that we can go back to playing, and hopefully they will fix all the mistakes that led to this being possible. But in the meantime, I feel much better about playing on their platform, on the NFBC NFFC platform. So if you have further questions, you can hit me up on social media, just Mason FWFB, or hit up Jason. His link tree for all of his social media is in the show notes. So, and
the only thing that's not in the link tree is my email address. It's pretty simple. My first name last name @gmail. If you want to reach out to me that way, feel free. You can't slide into my DMs unless you're on Instagram. You can do it there, but that's the other way. I don't put out the email address only because I don't want to get bombed with spammers. But if you're listening to the show, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, and my email is justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com. Feel free to email me as well, even if you have questions for the show. If you want to ask questions for us to answer on the show, we haven't done that in a really long time, but or
guests. Like, hey, who do you guys want? Give us some guest suggestions. Justin and I were talking last week. We've had a few, like, hey, who can we bring in on a Sunday? This week's a little tough because all the talent is focused with Nick on PitchCon right now,
which you and I will be there for. I'm going to be there in less than 2 hours, and then you're going to be there tonight.
Yes, I get to hit the cleanups. Cleanup when you're the very last slot of the evening. So I guess it's hitting cleanup. Just hoping to do my part. Good Lord willing, one day at a time. All the quotes. So
there you go. Because we're both going to be on PitchCon and we have stuff to prepare for. This will be a little bit shorter episode than we normally do on Sunday. But we do have actually some transaction to cover. I thought we were going to cover the Matt Chapman news to Chicago. Unfortunately, I was duped by a fake Jeff Passan, assisted by my wife, who was like, "You see Matt Chapman signed with the Cubs?" And I was like, "Oh, great." And I went and looked, and I was like, "Oh, Jeff Passan's picture, his name, not his Twitter handle." But Jason caught that. So we don't have to discuss that.
Yeah, I caught that. And I was like, and for listeners, Justin was just doing what every husband should do. Assume your wife is right.
Yeah.
But absolutely. You can't go back to her and say, you were wrong. Now, Justin, you may be able to go to the show afterwards and be like, "Hey, Danielle, we just talked about the whole Matt Chapman thing." And then she realizes, "Oh, crap, I forgot to tell you. I was duped." It's like, great. Now we've got to re-record. I'm going to go back to my room and buy yourself an extra hour. Go hide. And, sorry, Danielle. I know you're listening to this going, I thought I liked Jason. But all seriousness, if Matt Chapman, just real quick, it makes a ton of sense for the Cubs if they were to do that, because right now Nick Madrigal is slated to hit ninth and play third base for that team. So it makes a ton of sense if they were to do something, but it hasn't happened yet. Guys are reporting to camp in 2 weeks. I'm still surprised at the amount of names that are still sitting out there.
I'm shocked. I really thought we would have the vast majority of signings done by now, and we may be waiting on some of the lower end names. But right now, there's still top four free agents that have not signed.
Maybe it'll be this week because they're waiting to get the whole. Let's give the Super Bowl media day, and then okay, boom, let's try to get them in this week before football is just like completely drowning things out next week.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that is what the plan is. You got to think they're going to be signing. At least the top four are going to be signing before they all report to camp. So
see, if I had a fake Passan account, I'd be sending out Blake Snell's coming back to Tampa Bay. He got tired of waiting. He said, "I want to go back to Kyle Snyder."
But that would be a pretty easy tip off. That is a fake account right there. So, all right, let's talk about a third baseman that's got a new contract, but it is Colt Keith signing a long-term deal, a 6-year deal in Detroit, giving up that arbitration time. Do you think this means he is going to make the opening day roster?
I would assume so. I would be kind of surprised if they didn't do that. mean, it's nice to see them go out and do this. I think we were looking at or talking about the Tigers roster recently, and there's a lot of. I mean, Colt Keith was a guy that was getting all the attention. They need to have. And even I see that Jason Martinez has him listed as second base.
Interesting.
So I was kind of surprised there. I would think McKinstry would be the better second base fit there.
Well,
but
and they have Chase Young too in the minor leagues who
Yeah.
can take second base. So
Yep.
I don't think that Keith is going to be playing very much second at the major league level.
Yeah, so I could see him definitely coming up. When we look at his ADP over the past month, his ADP has been sitting just outside the 350 at 363 for the month of January in Draft Champions, min 300, max 403. Now that we would assume that he's going to have a bump, he should be moving up the process a little bit. So we should see that come up a little bit with that. And the position's got more depth. I'm not as concerned about third base this year. I don't know how you stand on that, but I think the position has more depth. And you look at where Keith is going right now. He's the 31st third base eligible player by ADP off the board. I could expect this signing to push him into the top 25 at a minimum. But you could also see him going up right on the fringe of the top 20, because right now Candelario is at 20, McMahon's at 21, Camanero's at 22, Rengifo at 23. The still unsigned Matt Chapman's at 24. And then Eugenio Suarez is sitting at 25, who, by the way, Zips really does not like this year. And if you had Eugenio Suarez, there's obviously a lot of risk there, but I was looking at reading something the other day, and it just talked about how Suarez was really not well liked by Zips.
Yeah, I think this definitely. I was actually just chatting with Paul. Just texting
of course, he loves it, right?
Yeah, like he was like, Colt Keith, and I was like Keith Colt.
Explains the sign over your shoulder there,
right? Exactly. I think what Paul said is what I agree with. I think this definitely gives him a better opportunity. I don't know for sure that he will make the opening day roster. He is not a good defender. And it really depends on, what the Tigers want to do in terms of the defense. I think that he is destined to be like a first base DH-man at some point in his career. Maybe they let him play third base for a little while, but he's a big dude with a lot of power and a pretty good hit tool. So I would take the gamble, I think, where he's going currently. And I mean, obviously he's going to go up quite a bit here in the next few weeks as drafts start to, go and reflect this. But yeah, I mean, right now you said he's the 31st
over in the month of January.
Okay, so my guess is he's gonna jump up probably to that Eugenio Suarez territory. But even that, like I'm
it's
okay
like
with
80
that.
picks.
Yeah,
like
that's
I'm 5-6 rounds.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent gamble. Yeah, I think I've got him already in a couple leagues. I did think he was going to be at least up early. So I'm glad I got the early discount. Discount's going to be gone now because he will be jumping up into that top 300 picks. But the hit tool is there, and there is a ton, like I said, a ton of power in the bat. I think that he could put up like a 250 to 260-ish season with 25 plus home runs in his rookie year if he's up day one. And I think there's more upside for even more power.
Yeah, I know there's likely some concern. Like if you look at the Detroit roster right now, this gives them 5 left-handed bats in the projected lineup with Parker Meadows, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Colt Keith, and Zach McKinstry. They can't platoon everybody. So yeah, they have Andy Ibanez and Matt Vierling on the bench. I know that I was listening to the outfield preview with Eno and DVR yesterday on driving around town, and they talked a little bit about this Detroit depth chart situation, but they can't platoon everybody. Somebody's going to have to come in here. Some of these lefties are going to be out there on a everyday basis. Ibanez could come in for McKinstry. Vierling could come in, but at the same time, as Eno and DVR were talking about, you have to look at center field defense and Riley Green, or Meadows, those guys will be in there doing that. So yeah, I'm not as concerned about platoon situation here because there's only so many guys they could platoon.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. Let's move on to the next guy. Hector Neris does go to the Cubs. No Matt Chapman yet, at least, but they did get Hector Neris. Any chance he gets into a closing role or is really fantasy relevant for the most part?
I would say this. I drafted Alzolay as my second closer in the AFL Speakers League a couple of days ago. And when I saw this Neris news, I was a little bit like, maybe I would have waited around. But then again, you look at Neris, and I definitely have my concerns here for him getting that if he were to do that, because you look at a few things. First of all, he's coming off the season with a 219 BABIP, and his career is like 280. But it was almost an 80 point drop from previous years. So that was an outlier for him. And then we're talking about a guy with a 32% ground ball rate, a lot of fly balls. And he was able to survive that in Houston because, Neris is one of the kings of soft contact. He gets a lot of that. Wrigley Field as a whole could be less forgiving rather than Houston, because Houston, yes, it has Crawford boxes, but the rest of the park plays okay. Wrigley on any given day could be problematic depending on the weather. So a high fly ball pitcher who's baked in for some regression that has had walk problems last year, I'm not terribly concerned. It's an option, but maybe you can get a little bit of a discount on Alzolay now based off this, but I'm not. I still think Alzolay is the guy leading this team in saves, and he's got 25 plus saves. Neris may pick up a handful. He's had 5 over the past 2 years. He had 12 with Philly, but pitched his way out of that. I mean, if you go back and look at 2021, where he pitched his way out of that role as well. So we'll see where it happens on this, but I don't think that Neris is going to come in and take the lion's share of saves.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think this is just added depth to the back end of their bullpen. Maybe if something were to happen to Alzolay, he got injured, something like that, Neris could be the next guy up. But they also have other guys in this bullpen that would make sense to be the next guy up. And Neris is
Billy Merriweather, baby.
Exactly.
I'll never quit Merriweather. And then you still have what's this? No, they got rid of him.
They have Mark Leiter.
I'm looking at Estrada, Jeremiah Estrada, the stuff, but
I'm sure I
forgot where he went.
I don't. Did he get moved or is he just down in the minors?
He got moved somewhere. Jeremiah Estrada is with the Padres.
Oh, there you go. So, all right, moving right along. Another guy who might get into some saves is Adam Ottavino, re-signing with the Mets. Kind of a really bummer move for him because he had opted out of a $6.5 million deal, only gets $4.5 million in the end to return to the Mets. But do you think Adam Ottavino could be a guy who gets some saves?
Yeah, the only upside to that for him is at least he's from that area. So it's like he doesn't have to leave home. He's got a whole pitching lab that he built in Brooklyn, I think. So, he's at least close to there. My thing with Ottavino has always been the risk that he brings to the table because, remember, he is like slow as molasses to home plate. And he has allowed, I think it's like when I was looking at something earlier, the amount of steals, the amount of stolen bases he has allowed when he's been on the mound over the past 3 years. There have been, what was the number? 22, 19, and 22. So that's 44, 19, 63 stolen bases over the past 3 seasons while he's been on the mound because he's that slow to home plate. But his best defense and preventing problems is just striking dudes out. And Ottavino continues to do that. And I would say my initial gut is like, how could a team put him in the closing role when Ottavino is allowing that many stolen bases? But 2 of the past 3 seasons, he's ended up with double-digit saves. He did it with Boston in 21. He did it with the Mets last year and had 12 last year. So he has his flaws. But if Edwin Diaz, if his knee is not 100%, and Lord, I hope it is because I took him in the 4th round. But if Edwin Diaz's knee isn't 100% or something goes wrong, Ottavino did it last year. Why can't he do it again? It's not perfect. Ottavino definitely has his flaws, but he still makes it work.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if Edwin Diaz is good, Edwin Diaz is going to be the closer there. But at this point, there's, Adam Ottavino is a really, really good pitcher that can provide strikeouts, pick up the occasional save. So I do like Adam Ottavino as a guy in deeper leagues. But, I mean, Diaz is supposed to be back healthy. He should be fine. So hopefully I drafted him. So
I'll say this in the 50 draft and hold, I will be taking Ottavino at some point. I may lose him, but in that, since I have Diaz, I'm not going to reach for Ottavino, but if he's still sitting out there at some point, I will probably end up taking him because it makes sense. If I've got that investment, who else, where else could they possibly go if something goes wrong? Maybe go with a guy who had 11 saves last year or 12. So I'll look to add him in the reserves.
All right. Adam Frazier signed a deal to go to the Royals. This is really frustrating for me because I was a big Michael Massey fan. I've drafted him in a bunch of spots. This complicates things. Is Adam Frazier going to be kind of the everyday guy at second base and kind of screw Michael Massey?
Hope not. My initial reaction when I saw this news was, but why? Then, so last year in Baltimore brings him back because they had all that youth. They needed some veteran experience. And honestly, that's what I'm hoping the Royals are doing here with Adam Frazier, is not to do what the Royals have historically done. And, the old Royals regime, let's bring in old washed up players and impact the playing time of our future. So for me, I would like to see Frazier hanging around, influencing Michael Massey, influencing Michael Garcia, using that veteran leadership. Because as I look, he is the second oldest. Only Sal Perez is older. He's got a month on Hunter Renfroe. So he's the second oldest guy on this team. And so I'm hoping they're bringing him in for experience and a safety net, and not as a primary piece with that. I mean, Frazier, this doesn't make him mixed league viable. You're going to have to take him in an AL only league. But to me, this should not be he's going to be in the lineup. This should be a backup insurance policy, because they need to play their future. They should not be messing with their future and saying, oh, Massey, I'm sorry, you had a weak slump. We're putting Frazier in the job. I would hate to see that.
Yeah. I mean, I really hope that this isn't the case. I mean, right now roster resource still has Massey as the guy, but this just feels like another situation in which they are just going to screw the guy that we like, right? They did this to Edward Olivares for years, and now they're going to screw Michael Massey. So I'm definitely a bit concerned, and I don't know how exactly I'm going to handle it quite yet, but I'll figure it out tonight. I'm going to sit down and think about this and update my projection on both these guys, and hope to God, that my Michael Massey shares weren't ruined, but I definitely am pumping the brakes a little bit at this point. Carlos Carrasco going to the Guardians. Any interest?
But why 2.0? It's a nice feel-good story that he gets to come back home. He's on a minor league deal with an invite to camp. So that'll be a nice thing a nice story. But why? No, they've got better options. And unless he comes back and they're like, oh, why don't you try the relief thing? Then I'm in it as a starter. Pass.
And I'm on mute. I'm so unenthused by the Carlos Carrasco to Cleveland signing that I didn't take myself.
I mean, if they put him in the bullpen, hey, just why don't you try this out? But other than that, no, I don't understand why they're doing this. He did not look good last year.
Well, and I mean, they've got a full rotation. Obviously, They've got a lot of risk. And maybe this is the beginning before another move. Maybe they're going to try to move Bieber or something like that. And they're like, okay, Carrasco, keep our fifth guy, see if it works out. But at this point, there's no spot for him in the rotation. So until I see something open up, if there's an injury, if there is a trade, then I would be more interested. But like you said, he was bad last year. And I think at this point in his career, the best is over. So no real interest in Carlos Carrasco for me as well. Alex Wood signing a deal to go to Oakland, just going to take the bridge across the bay, go over to Oakland and pitch there. Any interest in Alex Wood?
I would take Alex Wood in a 50 man draft and hold. If the matchups are right, it's team context. It's Oakland, wins are going to be problematic, but the ballpark perfectly fits his pitching style of soft contact, the extra foul territory. So you could see with the right matchups that he's usable as a potential streamer. And this, his ADP over the past month is 682. It's only a 50 person, but I could see him ending up on some 12-team AL only reserve list and then using him as a particular option. So if Alex Wood was going to sign anywhere, this would have been the place. Even then, I don't know if he's going to be able to give you more than 8 viable fantasy starts. And maybe they flip him and then he can flip somewhere else. But this at least moves the needle. I'm like, well, that's not bad. Let's see how this plays out.
I mean, at least you know that they're not going to play the same kind of games that the Giants played in terms of only letting them throw a few innings at a time, right? Like, so from like it's weird because usually from a fantasy perspective, when someone goes to Oakland, we're like, oh well, that just murders their value. But in some ways, it actually kind of helps his value. I mean, we're talking about a guy who only started 12 games last year, only won 5 games. If he only wins 5 games in Oakland, that's probably having a pretty good season in terms of amount of innings pitched. You can't count on much from Alex Wood, but I think he's a streamer in good matchups. It is a good park. And we have seen, him put it together, over the course of a full season before where everything goes right. So could that happen in Oakland and then he gets traded to a contender where he could win some more games? Absolutely. So
if you looking at the projections, Steamer's got him for 7 wins, 4.44 ERA, and a 1.39 WHIP. So ratios are problematic. I don't know if these have been updated for the move to Oakland and all that. But if you look what Wood's done previous seasons, even in 2022, 130 innings, 131 strikeouts. Now the ERA was bad, but Oakland should, that should help that out a little bit. So we know where he's possible. Double-digit wins is going to be an absolute miracle. Absolute miracle. But the other thing, the strikeouts would be there. Like I said, it's matchup dependent for Wood, but this at least I'm not dismissing him out of hand as I would have like, oh, hey, Alex Wood is signed with Cleveland. Okay, great. It's just not much of a thing for me because I don't know if he'd even make that rotation. He's making the rotation in Oakland. Somebody's going to draft him.
Yeah. I think that Wood is a pretty decent purchase in a deep league. Obviously 10s and 12s and even most 15s. I don't like, would you draft him in a regular 15 team league?
No.
Okay.
So taking away Mason Miller. I'm looking at ADP in January. Take Mason Miller out because Mason Miller's got an ADP of 211 because people are drafting him as a closer. What's the highest ADP of any other Oakland pitcher?
I would assume it's Luis Medina, and I would assume that's around pick 500.
It is JP Sears at 393. Luis Medina is at 570. So it's like
I've drafted both.
And Joe Boyle's at 445. There's like 2 Oakland pitchers that are currently going in shallow draft. 2.
Yeah, I mean, I've drafted both Medina and Sears in DCs, but like in a fab league, I don't know that I really want them just because Oakland's chances of winning are so low.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's finish out with Robbie Ray. A little bit of update on him. He has said that best case scenario that he could pitch around the All-Star break. I'm not drafting Robbie Ray anyways.
Right.
But does this change anything for you?
No, I wasn't drafting him either. I'm just looking at the impact of that. So if he's saying best case scenario, All-Star break, then that pushes that, that likely pushes him into August because the rule of thumb we have on this podcast, whatever the player says, add 2 to 3 weeks to it. So that gets him into August. And that's why I was surprised to see Robbie Ray's ADP still in the 500s somewhere. I would say it speaks better for the future, like Keaton Wynn sticking in the road and not losing that spot, or Kyle Harrison. And those are the 2 young kids with it. Ross Stripling is adding some kind of crazy pitch I saw the other day. I forgot what he's not calling it, the Devastator, but calling it something else. So it's like their rotation. Alex Cobb will beat Robbie Ray back to the rotation. So that's your fear of one of the kids losing their job is when Alex Cobb comes back in that situation. But I'm more interested in the younger arms in that rotation if Robbie Ray is now gone for 2/3 of the season. I mean, other than using a late 40s round pick on him, I don't understand the interest in using and having a dead spot in your lineup for like 4 months at a minimum. Not in your lineup, but on your depth chart with him. I'd rather take somebody else who has some upside and just punt Robbie Ray off to 2025.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love to see him get back on the mound this year and pitch so we can see how he looks, see that he's healthy, get some innings under his belt. So that way he's built up more for 2025. But this is a strict 2025 play. I never draft these guys coming off of Tommy John, especially if they're coming back mid-season. There's there's just no upside. There's a ton of downside. Like, this is the kind of guy, if he looks really good for some reason at this the All-Star break, you try to pick him up off of waivers. But I don't think you want to draft him and then hold him for half a season, especially with all the pitching injuries we saw last year. You'd have to think with them shortening the pitch clock again, we may see more injuries. Don't add this kind of risk.
And the other piece, it gets down by the time he comes back in August, your season could be over. And so, like, if you would have taken Alex Wood versus Robbie Ray, Alex Wood you'll be able to use and pick your spots, but you'll be able to use them. Whereas Robbie Ray just going to be sitting there. You know, I remember last year it got down to the point where I had to start Michael Lorenzen as he was like bleeding out in September because I didn't have anybody else, and I was trying to chase a couple of things. So it was like either dead spot. No, I need these numbers, and so I had to try. And it cost me. I fell to third place in a DC because of it. But I remember taking 27 hitters, 23 pitchers. And for me, if I'm staring at that, and part of that problem is some of my pitchers ended up getting hit early in the season. And so those were just dead spots to me all year. I can't imagine staring at a dead spot in April, May, June, July, and then hoping it comes back in early August. By then, your season, you could be out of reach. So get some players that you could use all throughout the season. Pick your battles, and then in a DC, if you don't have Robbie Ray for 6 weeks, oh well. In other leagues, wait. Don't even burn the roster. Just wait until he comes up and see what he is.
All right. That is going to wrap us up for this episode. Jason, what do you got going on, and where can people reach you at?
Yeah, so again, tune in tonight to Pitcher List for my slot at 8 o'clock Eastern as I interview Sarah Langs and Meg Rowley about hot takes for the 2024 season. So looking forward to hearing what those two women have to say about things. And then I am wrapping up the bold prediction series. I think this is early. This may be the earliest I've ever wrapped it up, but this week will be the AL East, the final installment of those over in the Collect Calls column at RotoWire. And I will be writing up Heston Kierstad, DL Hall, Tristan Cassis, Nick Pivetta, Juan Soto, Tommy Canley, Austin Shenton, Colby White, Davis Schneider, and Chad Green are the 10 players that I'm spotlighting in that. And so looking forward to that. But again, this is the earliest. So I will have put 60 bold predictions out there, 30 for hitters, 30 for pitchers. And you could use them against me in drafts, as everybody usually does and mentions it as I'm bidding on somebody. So there's that. And then, like I said, I've been trying to be more active in the podcast Discord. So keeping an eye on things in there so we can interact. And I see some comments on the YouTube channel and appreciate those. And that's really about it this week. What about you? You're muted again.
I'm just off my game today. So I am on the PitchCon panel this afternoon, really in just about an hour. So you won't hear this if you're listening to this in podcast form, only on the YouTube. But you can go back and watch the old panels because Nick will, I'm sure, put them up on that. I'm running for Fantasy Pros. I'm running for Fangraphs. And TGFBI signups are coming to a close here pretty soon. So if you want to get
I signed up already, right? I think
you're signed up. You're good.
Okay, cool.
You would have gotten multiple emails if you hadn't signed up yet. But yeah, TGFBI is coming up. And I'm really, really excited for that. Satellite leagues, if you want to try to win your way into next year's TGFBI. That will wrap us up for Jason and myself. Thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.
Thanks for listening.